My son called and said I was too ugly for the wedding, that I'd ruin their aesthetic. I felt the cut took a slow, grown woman breath and refused to beg for a chair at a table I helped build. Instead, I slipped on my mother's ring, chose a navy dress, and carried a small silver frame with a quiet truth tucked behind the backing, because sometimes paperwork is how a mother protects her dignity. That moment at the church door was only the beginning. What followed tested love boundaries and the meaning of family. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The rain ticked against my kitchen window, a metronome for bad news. Beaverton does gray very well. On a Tuesday in late March, it performs it to perfection. My phone buzzed across the table and spun so the front-facing camera caught a dim ghost of me, white hair, the lines I've earned. "Hi, Mom," Tristan said with the smile he uses on clients. "So, about the wedding." I kept my voice level. "Date and time are still Saturday at 11. "It is, but..." He exhaled. "Rebecca and I talked. Her family is very image conscious. We have a specific look, an aesthetic." He lingered on the last word. "You're not photogenic anymore. The photos matter. We really want them perfect." Rain counted between his sentences. "You're telling me I should stay home. I'm saying we think it's best. And Mom, while we're talking logistics, Rebecca's dad knows a place really nice where you'd get more support. Activities, meals, medical oversight. It might be time to consider long-term care." I watched my reflection in the screen. It did not flinch. "I still mow my lawn, Tristan. It's just peace of mind for everyone. We're starting a family soon. We won't be able to check in as often. You understand, right?" My hands were steady on the table. "I understand what you're asking." I kept my questions short, like I learned working front desk years ago. "You've both decided yes. Quick, relieved to be done. Thank you for letting me know." I did not say goodbye. I tapped the red circle. The rain kept time. The kitchen clock hummed. I put the phone face down and pulled the green binder from the hutch. 34 years I'd lettered on the spine in block print the day I retired. It landed with more weight than its size should allow. When I opened it, plastic sleeves breathed and order replaced the fog. First tab, the little duplex on Lombard deed amortization schedule, a note from the seller who needed out after a divorce. Second tab, the cinder block strip on Allen, 3 steady tenants and a loan I refinanced when rates dipped. Last month's payment stub tucked behind. Third tab, the 4-plex near the light rail appraisal, marked by my own questions, rent rolls printed and dated. Fourth tab, index funds, boring broad automatic. Fifth tab, life insurance summaries with premiums penciled in the margin. I made a list on a yellow pad in block letters. Call Colson. Will trust. Review beneficiaries. Update health directives. Inventory accounts. Lockbox check. I wrote next steps as if speaking to a future version of myself who might forget. I was not angry. I was oriented. What hurts isn't time. I have never apologized for my age. The wound is a frame being cropped the edges that show the scaffolding of a life, my hands at a kindergarten pageant. My car idling through high school practices, my pen on scholarship forms cut away so the new picture reads, cleaner. I wrote in the margin, they are editing the frame. Under it, smaller, firmer. I will not be warehoused. Ledger memories rose like numbers boxes I carried when he moved casseroles labeled with dates, the church key I kept after the fundraiser. The laptop woke to a neutral gray. I drafted an email to Colson, the estate attorney, who never pushed small talk. Subject revision, request capacity video plus no contest clause. In the body, I laid out the plan, move the will to a living trust, add a no contest provision with charitable remainder, schedule a recorded capacity statement at signing, confirm successor trustee, align TOD POD on accounts, review healthcare proxy and HIPAA, verify titling on properties, decide if any piece should be irrevocable later. The cursor blinked. No drama, just work. I read it once, corrected a date, clicked save, and set it to send at 8 the next morning. On my checklist, I added times. Wednesday, gather policy folders. Thursday, Colson. Friday, bank signatures. Saturday, quiet. The binder strap snapped when I closed it, a clean, satisfying sound. I set it on the table beside the phone and listened. Rain softened from metronome to hush. In the top drawer, I keep my mother's ring, a plain band with a tiny birthstone that catches light only when you move. I slipped it on and turned it once, twice a third time the way she used to before making a decision. From the hall closet, I took down a small silver photo frame I'd bought months ago without knowing why. I wrapped it in tissue and slid it into my handbag. At the sink, I practiced box breathing the way my nurse friend taught me in 4, hold 4, out 4, hold 4. The breath made a square. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon oil and damp wool. I opened my contacts and found Tristan. I tapped mute. Not block, not delete, just silence. A boundary that didn't require a speech. I set an alarm for 5:30 because estate offices open at 8, and I like to be dressed before daylight makes suggestions. The kitchen lights burn slightly yellow in this weather. I switched one off, then the other, until the window became a dark square that tossed my reflection back to me. White hair, soft halo lines I've earned. On the table, the green binder sat beside the wrapped silver frame, like two polite companions waiting to go different places. I put the phone face down again so it would stop catching my face in miniature. The house settled the way old houses do, with a shoulder roll and a long exhale. I locked the back door and checked the front, a habit my body keeps even when my mind is elsewhere. In my room, I laid out tomorrow's clothes: navy slacks, a sweater that doesn't pill low shoes, that don't argue with wet sidewalks. The rain slowed to a patter I could count without thinking. When I turned off the last lamp, the binder's title still showed in the streetlight's thin wash, 34 years. I stood a moment longer to memorize the quiet shape of my own order. Then I left both companions on the kitchen table and let the house go dark around them. In the morning, I would wake before the alarm anyway. Dawn finds me in the bathroom with the light over the mirror turned low, the color of rainwater. Steam softens the edges of my face. I touch the ring I wear for my mother, once to greet her, once to steady myself, once to say I'm here. 4 and 4, hold 4 out. Again. Box breathing is not magic. It is masonry. Each breath lays a small brick under my feet so I can stand where I mean to stand. I speak a few lines to the fogged glass, not to convince anyone, just to hear how my voice sits in my chest. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Congratulations. My tone is warm and adult. There's no pleading in it. On wet days, my right knee gets fussy, so I take the light folding cane I keep by the door, more umbrella than prop when sidewalks turn slick. I set it by the hall table and keep breathing. In the bedroom, I lay out clothes like instruments before a quiet recital. Navy sheath on the quilt, soft-shouldered jacket with pockets I can find without looking, low heels I can walk in for hours if I must, a silk scarf the color of tea. Nothing to catch the eye, everything to calm it. The handbag is already packed. Wallet, keys, tissues, phone, and the small silver frame wrapped in paper that will not crinkle loudly. I lift the bag to my shoulder and walk the hallway twice to feel the weight settle. The floorboards answer me with the familiar hush of a home that has learned my pace. At the stairs, I pause heel to toe, a private metronome, and let my spine remember its length. Rain ticks on the eaves, gentler than last night, more like a clock than a storm. My phone buzzes on the kitchen counter. Tristan has forwarded a PDF glossy with a pale beige cover and a serif font that tries to sound important. Reception, optics, do's and don'ts. It reads like a handout from a marketing firm, tidy bullets about visual distractions, cohesive palette, tight family frame. I can hear Bryn in the phrasing her gift for making a boundary sound like a kindness. There is a line about minimizing off-script moments, which is a delicate way of saying, don't be human in the photographs. I feel my jaw consider a reply, and then 4 in 4, hold 4 out. I don't give the moment my blood pressure. I tap a single thumbs up and mute the thread. The bell icon shows a small line through it, and my kitchen grows quiet again. The sky lifts from pewter to pearl as I drive toward Portland. NW 23rd keeps its own weather-damp sidewalks, hanging baskets that survive on missed windows that glow with the kind of light that sells sweaters. I find a metered space and feed the pole cane tip, tapping a dotted line of rain across the curb. The salon door opens with a bright chime that sounds like a spoon against a glass at a toast. Citrus and clean towels. A woman with dark hair and steady eyes smiles without leaning. "Aileen," she says, as if we're both adults doing our jobs. "Coat here. You're with me. I'm Celine." I give her my coat, and she settles the black cape around my shoulders with the same care you'd use to lay a napkin on a guest's lap. The chair rises on a soft pedal hiss. There is a relief in the ritual, the lift and separate, the gentle tug, the first sweep of the comb at the nape where new growth feels like velvet. Gray hair has its own weather too. It refracts rather than absorbs. Celine studies shape, not age. "Tell me what you want it to do," she says. "Not how it should look, but what it should do." "Hold its line," I say. "Move when I turn my head. Photograph like itself." She nods and begins scissors sounding like tiny knitting needles. Little arcs of silver fall onto the cape and gather near the snap like commas in a sentence I'm still writing. We talk in the ordinary way strangers do when no one is angling for an outcome. Rain the price of parking a new bakery 2 doors down that sells cardamom buns. The blow dryer hums in a tone that reminds me of my old sewing machine. When the sound drops, she leans back to look. The mirror offers me without apology. "You have a face with a story," she says, matter of fact, neither sales pitch nor sympathy. Camera people love that. She is not flattering me. She is telling me how light works. I meet my own gaze, clear-lined awake, and for once I don't negotiate. I let the sentence land and live. My mother's ring glints like punctuation. At the retail shelf, she gestures to a regiment of bottles with silver caps. I shake my head once. "Tools, not talismans," I say, smiling. She laughs. I choose a travel hairspray and a wide-tooth comb I can keep in my bag. I tip fairly and sign my name in the same steady hand I used when Tristan was 10, and I wrote notes to his teachers explaining why he'd be late for pickup after practice. "Thank you, Celine," I say, using her name, because names are a kind of dignity. "You're welcome, Aileen." She answers the bell, chiming behind me as I step back into the street. At home, the afternoon pulls itself into neat lines. I hang the jacket on the back of a chair and set the garment bag by the door so I cannot forget what tomorrow requires. The kitchen timer on the stove keeps time better than any app. I twist it to 60 seconds and practice 3 sentences aloud, not more. "Thank you for inviting me." The timer clicks. "Congratulations to you both." Click. "I'll let the young people shine." Click. Then I stand in the quiet and practice an answer that is not an answer at all, a polite nod and silence that does not apologize for itself. I tap the ring once against my thumb. The sound is small and sufficient. The binder waits on the table where I left it, its green spine, a calm stripe in the room. I do not open it. The point of preparation is not to crowd the moment, it is to make space inside it. My phone pings, but not from the muted thread. The calendar reminds me downtown tomorrow, 10:30. Colson's office documents I asked for a notary's seal that will sound like a lock turning. I acknowledge the alert and slide the phone face down. Outside, the rain has thinned to a sheen that makes the streetlights taller. I set the door chain, a habit from years when I lived alone and liked knowing who had the key. In the hallway mirror, the haircut holds its line. It will not make me someone I'm not, and that is the point. I touch the ring again. Hello, steady me, I'm here, and breathe in 4s. I place the handbag on the chair arm where I will see it as I pass and turn out the light in the kitchen. The house settles with a sigh I recognize. Sleep will come if I do not chase it. The cane waits by the door in case the morning is slick. I am not practicing how to dazzle anyone. I am practicing how to keep my footing. The phone stays quiet. The thread I muted will not tell me how to be tonight. There is a mercy in that. I rinse a mug, set it on the rack, and let my hands rest on the edge of the sink palms warm from water. Tomorrow I will carry the binder not to prove worth, but to protect it. Tomorrow I will sit in a chair that smells like paper and old coffee and make choices I should have made earlier now that I see the frame I built and the piece I will not let anyone cut out. One breath, then another. Lights off. The public garage smelled faintly of wet asphalt and machine oil as I eased my car into a slot on the third level. March clouds pressed low over Portland, a drizzle streaking the windshield while I cut the engine. I gathered the 34 years binder, and my driver's license slipped my mother's ring around my finger and locked the door with a soft click. Inside the elevator, fluorescent light hummed overhead. My reflection in the brushed steel doors looked steady enough, chin level, shoulders square. When the bell dinged for the 12th floor, I drew one slow breath and stepped out. Colson's office greeted me with the scent of warm toner and stale coffee. A receptionist waved me toward the glass-walled conference room. Colson himself waited beside a polished oak table, a folder already tabbed and ready. "Morning, Aileen," he said, his voice brisk but kind. "Everything you asked for is set." I placed the binder on the table with care. "Let's begin," I said, matching his steady tone. Colson started with the basics, capacity questions, simple and direct. My name, today's date, my address, the name of my son. I answered each without hesitation. "And your purpose today?" he asked. "I want to update my will, establish a pour-over trust, and include a no-contest clause," I replied. "Charitable bequests preferred." His fountain pen scratched across a yellow legal pad. "Good. A short video statement will strengthen the file," he noted. "One, take nothing fancy." I nodded the ring on my finger, catching a shard of light from the window. He explained the framework and updated will that transfers all assets to irrevocable trust, advance directives, handled separately. I asked about taxes, timelines, and beneficiary language, and he answered each question with patient clarity. When we reached the clause itself, he slid a single sheet across the table. "This is the shield," he said. I read aloud, "Any heir who contests this, will and fails, shall receive nothing." Blue ink in hand, I initialed each margin. The motion felt like setting a lock. A small camera on a tripod faced me. "Whenever you're ready," Colson said. I looked straight into the lens. "My name is Aileen. I am of sound mind and acting of my own free will. I choose a no-contest clause to protect my decisions. I love my son, and I will not be managed." One take. No tremor in my voice, no tears. The red light blinked off. Colson gave a short, approving nod. The notary entered brisk and businesslike. She examined my ID, watched me sign, and pressed the embosser into the paper. The metal click rang like a small bell of finality. Colson slid the originals into a fireproof folder and handed me certified copies in a slim envelope. "I'll coordinate the trust funding steps with your bank officer," he said. "Expect 2 emails, one confirming the trust package, another after post-execution verification." "Thank you," I said, tucking the envelope into my bag. Outside, the city air tasted of rain and roasted coffee. I bought a black coffee from a sidewalk cart, the steam warming my hands as I crossed toward the parking garage. The embosser's click still vibrated in my palm, a quiet proof of what I'd done. The church doors stood open, brass handles glinting in the late morning light, while the faint hum of the organ rehearsal floated into the damp Portland air. I tightened the strap of my handbag and stepped inside rain, still purling on the stone steps. A young usher in a crisp black suit raised his tablet and scanned my chest, his gaze quick and clinical. Vendor or guest, he asked the question, delivered without a trace of malice, yet it sliced all the same. Guest. I replied, my voice steady as a leveled beam. He hesitated for half a heartbeat before offering a polite nod and gesturing me forward. The brass handle was cool beneath my fingers as I crossed the threshold, the scent of polished wood and old hymnals settling around me. A woman in a lilac scarf peeled a small adhesive label and pressed it to my jacket. Guest black letters stark against navy fabric. I smoothed the edge myself, not to hide it, but to own it, the tiny hiss of adhesive, louder in my ears than the choir's careful scales. Further inside, a coordinator with a practiced smile held out a laminated QR code. "Scan for your seat," she said, her voice light as a bell. I raised my phone and watched the blue-white map blossom on the screen. Where it should have read Mother of the Groom, there was only a clean NA. I locked the screen, letting the reflection of my own face replace the omission, and slipped the phone back into my bag, the cool silver frame inside brushing my fingertips like a reminder. A wicker basket of ivory programs stood near the aisle. I took one and unfolded it just enough to read the wedding party credits. Beneath Parents of the Groom stretched a single long dash, silent, deliberate. I folded the paper once with a crisp crease and slid it beside the comb in my handbag. Couples drifted past me toward rows marked "Reserved Family," their laughter spilling into the nave. I stepped aside unhurried, letting their movement flow around me like a quiet river. The velvet ropes and brass stanchions traced a pale path down the aisle, but I remained where I chose, invisible by design, the weight of my own dignity, my only guide. At the edge of the foyer, a bronze donor's plaque caught a wash of colored light from the stained glass, each letter gleaming like a silent benediction. I adjusted the strap of my bag, the folded program balanced within, and moved toward a shadowed corner at the rear. The choir's vowels rose and softened above me as I settled into the stillness, present, unclaimed, and entirely composed. The foyer's sidelight caught the bronze donor's plaque just as I entered, and a wash of stained glass color shimmered across its surface. My maiden name rested there in a clean, deep etch, steady between two lines of smaller gifts. I paused and touched the cold metal with a single fingertip, a private recognition that no one could edit. One breath in a 4-count hold, and I stepped back, the bronze now warming beneath the light like a quiet heartbeat. I moved through the nave as a pair of elderly guests glided ahead, their coats brushing the varnished pews. The scent of polished wood and candle wax guided me down the side aisle. Up front, the first 2 rows carried white cards marked "Reserved Family," but I didn't alter my pace or angle toward them. Without a flicker of hesitation, I continued to the last pew and slid into the end seat, the soft thud of the kneeler a gentle punctuation. The guest sticker from check-in still clung to the navy wool of my jacket. I ran a thumb along its edge to keep it flat, neither tearing it away nor letting it wrinkle. It was only paper and glue, not an insult I had to carry, and it stayed where it was as I settled my handbag beside me. From the rear of the church, I could see everything. The 2 reserved family rows remained perfectly empty, their tent cards pristine, untouched tissues, waiting in crystal holders like props for a scene no one would play. A photographer rehearsed angles and simply stepped past those seats as if they were furniture. I noted each detail the way an auditor marks a column of numbers, fact not drama, while the ache pressed tight, but stayed silent. A couple approached and paused with polite smiles. "Is this pew free?" the man whispered. I shifted my handbag to make space and nodded. We exchanged a quiet greeting, nothing more. I neither announced my relation to the groom nor hid it. My knees touched hands folded lightly over my mother's ring, the strap of my bag crossing my chest like a calm line of defense. The organ began its prelude notes, swelling in slow, measured phrases. I counted the beats between them as I once counted mortgage payments, each interval a small act of order. The folded program rested deeper in my handbag, its blank Parents of the Groom line mercifully hidden. I had no need to read it again. The aisle stretched before me like a pale river, and those 2 untouched rows stood as silent islands no one would claim. Dust motes drifted in a shaft of colored light, while the music gathered above. I drew a final breath to 4, felt my shoulders settle, and let the moment fix itself steady, complete beyond erasure. My phone vibrated once inside the bag, then fell still. I did not check it. I heard it before I saw the cluster at the front, "Immediate family only." The words rolled down the nave like a tide, and guests drifted toward the narthex in a soft shuffle of coats. I rose, smoothed the navy jacket with its small guest sticker, and kept to the side aisle with the steadiness I use stepping off a curb. The lead photographer lifted his camera. A sliver of light flashed off the lens hood, then steadied. I moved only far enough to be respectful, then set both heels on a seam. I felt the seam through the leather, a small ridge saying, "Here is your mark." Beyond it, the camera beeped. Relatives arranged by height, the coordinator reminding shoulders square. I kept my shoulders square and let the draft pass over me. The second shooter glanced toward me and made a small wave as if to offer space. I answered with a quiet smile and a single shake of my head. My palms stayed low, no performance. Leora's mouth shaped a quick thank you. I nodded once. The shutter rattled in disciplined bursts like a zipper closing on a suitcase. I neither stepped in nor backed away. I held the line I had chosen. It read as courtesy and felt like control. Someone spoke my given name with that careful politeness reserved for inconveniences. I lifted my chin, counted to 4, let the sound pass, and watched the next pose settle. Veil, fan, shoulders squared again. I could have reminded them I once ironed shirts like that and stitched buttons back onto those coats, but a reminder would have been an audition. I was not auditioning. A hymn page fluttered. I breathed with the organ's held note. When the group tilted toward the side garden, I stepped into the nave's shadow and looked down the aisle I had studied all morning. The runner was a river, and the 2 reserved family rows were still tidy, untouched islands. I took out my phone, steady hands, and lifted it just high enough to clear the pew in front of me. One press of the shutter. No zoom, no filter. The click hid under the cord. The horizon stayed level. I tapped edit and cropped until the tent cards were sharp and the altar only a suggestion. No faces, no gossip. Just the fact of 2 empty rows and a long white path between them. I titled the photo "Truth of the Room" and saved it. My thumb locked the screen. The image did not travel anywhere. Possession was enough a small deed to reality that could not be reworded. Back in the narthex, the air mixed cold stone and warm wool. A pair of grandparents reached the door as I did. I stepped aside and held it open with my palm, flat against the brass. "Beautiful day," I said, because in its way, it was the kind of March sunlight that makes color out of stained glass. They smiled with the relief of people shepherding small victories, and I followed after them, the hinge whispering. I touched my mother's ring once, then felt through tissue for the weight of the small silver frame in my handbag. The receiving line had begun to coil toward the bride and groom, slow enough to show hands quick enough to discourage speeches. I joined without hurry, placing one careful body length between me and the couple ahead. At the head, the coordinator squared a tablecloth corner. That small square looked like proof order could still be made. From behind, laughter lifted ordinary and bright. I kept my breath even and let my eyes rest on the doorway, where the garden showed winter-green hedges and damp flagstone. The photographer jogged past with a bag bumping his hip. I stepped right to give him a lane, as in a grocery aisle. Courtesy is a kind of wealth that cannot be taxed. It comes from decisions already made. The line advanced. A bridesmaid's bouquet brushed my sleeve and left a trace of eucalyptus. I thought of the crop on my phone and of the claws embossed this morning. 2 small locks clicked into place. One guarded a boundary inside a picture. The other guarded the years it took to earn the money behind that picture. Neither required an announcement. Those who needed to see would, and those who didn't would call it nothing. I could live with both outcomes. Immediate family, only the photographer called again for one last grouping outside, and the crowd divided itself without drama. I stayed where I was, half a step back from any claim. When the wind lifted the bride's veil and the groom laughed, I let myself enjoy the sound the way you enjoy bells in another parish, pleasant, not binding at all. The line curved toward the point where I would hand over the frame. I breathed in, held for 4, let out for 4, and let the moment balance itself. I looked down at the guest sticker pressed smooth on my jacket and left it. A label could organize a hallway. It could not organize me. The ring was the truer mark. I tapped it with my thumb, felt the cool circle, and lifted my eyes. When the couple ahead stepped forward to their congratulations, I shifted my bag to my left hand and prepared the right. There was nothing to prove and a few things to protect. As the line shortened, the doors breathed a wider square of light across the floor. I stood inside that square and let warmth find my cheek. I thought of the mosaic seam where I had planted my heels, of the way a line on the floor can teach you how to draw a line in the air and hold it. The camera beeped once. I adjusted the strap and took my place for what came next, not to be seen, but to be exact in how I would see. I waited my turn. The receiving line curved like a slow river through the narthex, soft with murmurs, and the faint sweetness of garden flowers still damp from morning rain. I stepped in behind two couples and let the quiet rhythm guide my breath. My palm rested against the silver frame hidden in tissue inside my bag, feeling its familiar weight, as if it carried every silent hour of preparation. I rehearsed 3 simple sentences. Thank you for inviting me. Congratulations to you both. I'll let the young people shine. Then let them dissolve. 2 guests ahead of me. Tristan's smile flickered in a way I remembered from scraped knees and Little League victories, the barest ghost of the boy I raised. Beside him, Bryn's posture was elegant and practiced her bouquet wrapped with a neat satin ribbon that caught the overhead light. I inhaled for 4 counts, exhaled for 4, holding my poise like a balanced glass. When my turn came, I stepped forward and met Bryn's eyes first. Congratulations, you look beautiful, I said, handing her the wrapped silver frame. She accepted it with a gracious thank you. The line moved a fraction. I turned to Tristan, touching the sleeve of his jacket, once light, precise, unmistakable. Leaning close enough for the camera's flash to mistake it for a kiss on the cheek, I whispered 6 words into his ear, quiet and deliberate. The truest pictures are the honest ones. His shoulder tensed for the briefest beat, a micro pause he couldn't disguise. Then he nodded automatically as the photographer's shutter clicked behind me. As I eased back, my fingers pressed the frame slightly toward Bryn. The backboard taped and secure, flexed just enough to promise discovery later. Be happy, I said to them both, the words gentle and final. Inside that frame's velvet backing lay 2 carefully chosen documents, a photocopy of the MBA guarantee I once signed for Tristan and the church restoration receipt stamped paid beside my maiden name. They were not threats, only proof quiet records of love and responsibility waiting for the day someone might need to remember. I stepped aside for the next guest, offered the coordinator a polite nod, and followed the curve of the narthex toward the doors. No backward glance, no extra breath wasted. The March air outside was crisp bright, with a thin beam of afternoon sun. I checked my watch, called a cab, and slid my phone to silent again. The frame was no longer in my bag. My hands felt unexpectedly light, as if setting down a private burden. I walked into the cool street air with a certainty that needed no announcement, each step carrying the quiet knowledge that the truth was already where it belonged. I hung my jacket by the door and set the phone face down on the counter before turning on the kettle. The kitchen smelled faintly of rain-soaked cedar, and the porch light haloed the driveway in a soft glow. The house felt intentionally ordinary, every object in its place, each surface reflecting a quiet I had chosen. One voicemail waited. "Call me Mom," Tristan's voice said when I finally checked. I made tea instead. By the time I'd taken a slow sip, the counter showed 3 messages. A thin ribbon of steam rose from the cup as the phone blinked, the tiny red badge pulsing like a heartbeat. I tapped play and listened to each in sequence, noting times rather than words. Neutral, annoyed, managerial. I listed the timestamps on a yellow sticky note, the click of my pen, keeping tempo like the old days of balancing a mortgage ledger. Arithmetic, not emotion. Message 6 shifted the air. "We need to talk about the frame." Number 8 arrived tight and urgent. Bryn's dad saw the document. By the 10th, he sounded cornered. "Why would you do this to us?" I stopped there. "No more tonight." My thumb hovered above the play arrow, then lowered. Screen dim. Rule set. An email banner slid across the screen. Colson. Subject line: trust package prepared pending activation. Inside: calm precision confirmation of the no contest clause. Next steps for funding appointments. I starred it. Blue enclosed mail. Legal order humming beneath family chaos. A new voicemail from an unknown number followed. Ms. Delgado's voice was courteous, professional. Ms. Morrison, we received an inquiry tied to accounts listed in your trust draft. Please return my call Monday. I pressed save, listening to the soft chime. Bank business would keep until business hours. I turned on Do Not Disturb, placed the phone in the hallway, and washed the kettle. Moon icon lit, faucet side. Bedroom door closed. I slept. Morning sunlight stretched across the counter. Coffee steamed beside a legal pad where I drew 2 columns, personal and procedural. Under personal, I wrote, no callbacks today. Under procedural reply, Colson Mon, call Delgado Mon. Shred duplicates for privacy. The page creased neatly when I folded it. Before setting the phone aside for good, I played the final message. Tristan's voice was thick with remorse, specific and unguarded, free of excuses. I archived every voicemail into a folder labeled Wedding Night and locked the screen. By noon, the storm had spent itself against a silent house. Outside, clouds drifted and thinned. Inside, my breathing matched the slow steadiness of weather, clearing the calm that comes when you hold the boundary and let the sky rearrange itself. Ms. Delgado met me at the Hillsborough Bank's glass-walled reception with a warm, professional handshake and a small brass key dangling from a numbered tag. The key's weight rested in my palm as she guided me down a carpeted hallway and closed her office door, the frosted strip along the glass blurring the bustling lobby beyond. The morning smelled faintly of copier, toner, and rain-damp coats, a business day rhythm I trusted. I slid my driver's license and the printed certification for the A.M. Morrison Revocable Trust across her desk. She reviewed Colson's emailed instructions, yellow highlighter gliding across each funding step. I initialed where she placed blue flags, checking account brokerage, and the rental income stream, our quiet duet of signatures and assurance. Only then did she explain the alert that had prompted Saturday's voicemail. The weekend compliance team noticed activity tied to your church donation and the new trust. Ian, she said. Nothing paused, we just needed confirmation. Her voice carried no accusation. I met her eyes and said simply, confirmed. A single checkbox clicked closed on her monitor, and with it the small knot in my chest. We moved through the transfers with steady efficiency. The primary checking and brokerage accounts shifted into the trust's name. We ordered new checks, scheduled a wire from the duplex income account, and printed updated transfer on death designations for residual assets. Each page received my signature, the loop of my pen, deliberate, unhurried. Paper whispered from the printer like a quiet metronome, a sound of power settling into order. Downstairs, the vault opened with a deep metal sigh. Inside the cloth-lined box, I placed one certified copy of the Will One Trust abstract and a small USB holding my recorded statement from weeks before. I removed a folder of outdated statements to shred later the brass key, cool against my fingertips as I locked the door to the box again. Next door at the title office, a clerk in a navy blazer notarized a quitclaim transferring the Beaverton house into the trust. The stamp landed with a solid thump, carbonless forms, crisp beneath her hand, one more hinge in a structure built to outlast sentiment. In the parking lot, I composed a brief email to Colson Funding Initiated. Please place the letter for Tristan in escrow to be released only upon my passing or explicit written instruction. His reply came within minutes, escrow set, as requested. The small whoosh of the sent message felt like the soft seal of a door. I glanced at my phone, several missed calls from Tristan. The blue Oregon sky stretched overhead as I slipped the phone back into my bag without dialing. Some conversations could wait, perhaps forever. Back home, I filed the fresh documents in my fireproof box. The lid closed with a muted click, echoing the embosser's sound from weeks ago. Paper seal key, the sequence complete, the boundary drawn. 3 quick knocks close together, the way he used to tap on his bedroom door when he was late for curfew, and wanted mercy. I placed my palm on the deadbolt, breathed in, 4, held 4, out 4. The porch light threw a soft circle across the mat I'd shaken clean that morning. I slid the chain so it caught open the door a hand's width and met my son's eyes through the gap. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was careful. The new band on his finger flashed when he pushed his hair back. "If you speak to me with respect, I'll remove the chain," I said, level as a countertop. "If you raise your voice, I'll close the door." He nodded once, shoulders tight under a suit jacket that looked as if it had slept on a chair. "I can do that. Good." I unhooked the chain and opened the door. He stepped in without the usual hug, and I didn't offer one. We walked to the kitchen neutral ground, 2 chairs angled at the table, instead of across from each other. I set a glass of water in front of him, then one for me, letting the quiet arrange the next sentence. "I owe you an apology," he said. No preface, no throat clearing. Not a pretty one, a true one. I waited. "I told you not to come because I thought you'd wreck the photos," he said, eyes on the grain of the table. "Because I let optics matter more than a mother. I let other people's standards run me. That's on me." I nodded, once the way a judge might signal the clerk to continue. "Thank you for saying it plainly." He looked up then. The boy I raised was in there pushing against a wall he'd built himself. "May I sit and explain?" Inside, not on the porch. "You're already inside," I said, and the corner of his mouth lifted just a little. We sat. He took a sip, braced himself like a swimmer at the edge. "Why the frame?" he asked. "Why put papers in a wedding gift so the record could meet the story?" I said. "Not to embarrass you. To keep truth from being crowded out by a theme." I didn't mention numbers or balances. I spoke of responsibility and receipts of a roof repaired and an education underwritten of the quiet math mothers do in the years when children are sleeping and bills still arrive. He rubbed his forehead and nodded. Bryn's dad opened it. He didn't make a scene, but he handed me the paper like it burned. "Paper doesn't burn," I said. "People do when they pretend it isn't there." He winced, not because the line was sharp, but because it was clean. I slid my phone across the table and woke the screen. The photo from the back of the church filled the glass, the aisle like a pale river, 2 reserved family rows, empty as islands at low tide. "This is what I saw," I said. I didn't share it. I took it to remember the world as it was not the one anyone curated. He studied the image longer than I expected, jaw-working, shoulders lowering as if a weight had been set down gently where it couldn't roll. "That's bad," he said, finally quiet. I let that happen. "You did," I said. "And you can stop letting it happen, but not for a payout, for your life." I sat back, folded my hands so my mother's ring caught a small circle of light. I've set my estate plan with a no contest clause. It's not a punishment. It's a boundary that keeps everyone honest. There won't be quick reversals because someone is suddenly sorry. People can be sorry and still be accountable. He flinched, then steadied. "I'm not asking for money," he said. "I'm asking how to fix this." "You don't fix a person," I said. "You become one. You learn, you change, you treat your wife with care, you treat your mother with respect, you stop outsourcing your spine." A breath opened his chest and fell. "I can try," he said. "I can do more than try." He reached for a negotiation and caught himself like a man pulling his hand back from a hot skillet. "Not a bargain," he added. "A practice." "That word will serve you," I said. "Practice." He took another drink of water, not hiding behind it, just buying a second to keep his voice even. "You mentioned a letter," he said. "In one of the voicemails you didn't return." "I placed a letter with my attorney," I said. "It will be given to you only upon my passing or if I instruct him in writing. Not today, not as leverage. It exists to carry what I can't predict and what you might need later when I'm not standing in your kitchen saying ordinary sentences." He nodded, eyes bright. but not leaking. Then I won't ask for it. Good, I said. We let the clock on the wall speak for a few beats. It sounded like a metronome set to a march I no longer had to keep pace with. I'd like to call once a week, he said at last. Not to re-argue this, to tell you about Thursday dinners and bad traffic. To listen. I can make it Sundays so we don't step on work. 5 minutes, I said. No crisis dumping, no optics reports. Weather meal's a good joke. If you yell, the call ends. If you forget, we try again next week. My voice was the way it had been when he was 10, and long division taught him patience, firm, warm, not negotiable. That sounds right, he said. I can do that. He looked at his ring, then almost surprised to find it there, the way newlyweds are surprised by anything that suddenly lives on their hands. Bryn said she'd call you. I told her to wait until I did. She didn't listen. I prefer reality to precedence, I said. If she contacts me, I'll respond like an adult. If she goes public, I'll remain private. That's the line. He sat with that head bowed. Thank you for not posting the photo, he said. I didn't take it for a crowd, I said. I took it so the future wouldn't gaslight the past. I tapped the phone dark and slipped it back into my pocket. Respect starts at the door. It continues at the table. It shows in who you seat and who you refuse to erase. He nodded, and for a brief second, I saw the boy who used to press his cheek against the cool side of the fridge after soccer practice, promising he'd drink water before asking for orange soda. The man stood up a second later, chair legs rasping softly against the tile. I'm sorry, he said again. Not as a plea, but as a statement a grown man makes when he knows words are the beginning of a debt and not the payment of it. We walked to the door together. The porch light cut the evening into 2 long shadows that reached toward the driveway and didn't touch. He put his hand on the frame, not the silver one, the wooden one, around my front door, and looked at me. The way people look at something steady after a storm, not worshiping it, just grateful it held. Respect starts at the door, I said, repeating the line not as a lesson, but as a border. If you cross it with care, you're welcome. If you don't, you'll find it closed. I hear you, he said. I'll see you Sunday. Good night, Tristan. Good night, Mom. He stepped onto the mat and down into the wedge of light. I closed the door without haste, slid the chain back into its track, and felt the house settle around me like a coat that fits again. I washed the 2 glasses, dried them, and put them back upside down in the cabinet. The ring on my finger felt cool and present. On the counter, the legal pad from earlier lay capped and quiet as if it understood that sometimes the most adult thing to do after a hard conversation is nothing at all. No dramatic exits, no midnight rewrites, only the next breath, and then the one after that. The first ping arrived as the kettle began to murmur a bright badge, blooming on my phone with a link to a captioned square soft focus, vows a sunlit veil, and a tidy paragraph about an estranged parent who brought stress to a sacred moment. More links stacked from acquaintances who didn't tag me only nudged the story into my view like neighbors whispering through a fence. A gray bubble with Tristan's name pulsed, then disappeared. I turned the burner off, poured water over a tea bag, set the phone face down, and let the house be quiet long enough to choose what I would and would not do. When I turned it over again, I took one step. First, I opened the camera roll, looked at the aisle photograph I had taken the pale runner, the 2 untouched islands of the family rose, then closed it without sharing. The picture would remain what I intended it to be, a record, not a weapon. I pulled a chair to the desk and opened a ruled notebook to a fresh page. On the left, I wrote public claims. On the right, verifiable facts. Under claims, I copied the exact phrases from the post-quotation marks and all. Under facts, I listed Time's taxi to the church at 10:42, program folded and tucked at 10:58, donor's plaque photographed at 11:03, receiving line passed without incident, cab home at 1:17. I added one line in plain print, no disturbance, no confrontation. I drew neat boxes beside each item. The act of making columns slowed the blood and steadied the day. The comment count ticked upward anyway, as numbers do when fed. A florist forwarded the coordinator's all-vendor email, "Please avoid gossip. No disturbances occurred. Seating honored as planned." It did not name me. It did not need to. Neutral words are sometimes the sharpest tools because they do not ask for agreement. They simply sit where the facts belong. Replies under the bride's post slowed, then slid toward admiring the flowers. That felt right. Petals deserve praise more than rumors do. I called the church office, left a short voicemail for the administrator, and followed with an email attaching a scan of the restoration receipt, the one with my maiden name and the red paid block, like a period at the end of a long sentence. My note was simple: for your records, should anyone ask about the roof work, please describe it as funded by community donors. No adjectives, no allusion to a wedding. A few minutes later, a courteous reply thanked me for the documentation and confirmed that captions would be checked in the morning. I wrote church caption under fax and drew another empty box. Colson's email arrived with his customary spareness, a right of reply draft should any outlet use my name, and a conditional cease and desist addressed to the bride's PR inbox. Both were short, courteous, and purely factual. I saved the PDFs in a folder named If Required and closed the window. I did not feel vengeful. I felt buckled like a passenger who trusts the belt to do its work if the road surprises her. Then I rinsed my mug and listened to the house, which sounded like a house ought to pipe settling refrigerator hum, the small sigh a furnace makes before it rests. Near dusk, a small society website posted its weekend roundup. Vendor credits a paragraph on the sanctuary's history, and in a sidebar, a plain sentence, "Roof restoration completed last year, thanks to donors including A.M. Morrison." No editorial, no tilt. The line fell into the evening as quietly as a coin into a well, and for the first time since the kettle murmured, I felt the bride's varnished version loosen. I drew a careful check mark, then closed my eyes and let the quiet hold. My phone breathed once. A single text from Tristan landed and waited with its small blue dot. I saw it. Nothing else. I typed nothing back. We had agreed that Sundays at 5 would be for words. This was neither Sunday nor 5, and silence is also a sentence when offered with intention. I set the phone at the edge of the desk and finished the last swallow of now lukewarm tea. Before bed, I walked the list again. Under public claims, a few new lines had been added by strangers. Under verifiable facts, the boxes were filling coordinator email saved, church caption pending, legal drafts prepared, aisle photo retained, private. I scrolled to my camera roll and looked once at the image I had taken, the pale river of the runner, the two untouched islands of the family rose, and then locked the screen. Some pictures belonged to the record, not the crowd. I turned on the porch light and stood in its quiet hum, watching the street reset to ordinary, a jogger's vest, a dog choosing grass, a bin, rolled to the curb. Inside the notebook stayed open to facts, not feelings. One unchecked box waited for morning, nothing more dramatic than a line of text beneath a photograph. I breathed in 4, held 4, released 4, and let my shoulders settle the way the house settles after heat turns off. Morning placed a clean rectangle of sun on the desk. An email slid in from the administrator caption, "Updated restoration funded by community donors. Thank you for your records." I checked the final box, closed the notebook, and slid it into the drawer with the soft sound of cardboard against wood. Outside, a delivery truck sighed and moved on. Inside, the phone lay face down. The photo stayed private. The story for once seemed willing to stand up straight without me bracing it, and that was enough. One task I left for daylight sat quiet in my handbag, an envelope sealed, the name written. In the morning, I would take it to Colson, read it once, on camera sign what needed signing, and file it where it belongs, among pages that can be found. When the sun lifted over Cedar Hills, I picked up my keys and a calm breath and locked the door. The red tally light blinked once and held steady. I sat tall in Colson's conference room, the glass walls making a soft mirror of my shoulders. "My name is Aileen Morrison," I said, and the room felt level. I stated the date, my address, my son's name, and then the sentence I had practiced in the quiet of my kitchen boundaries, our love with a spine. Colson read the no contest clause in a calm courthouse cadence. I affirmed each line without tremor. When he asked if anyone had pressured me, I said no. When he asked if I was making these decisions freely, I said yes. The microphone did its small electric purr. The camera's red dot stared and did not blink. We paused for water. The glass left a perfect ring on the coaster. Colson slid a heavy envelope toward me, the letter for Tristan. My handwriting on the front looked like my mother's when she signed permission slips. We reviewed the rule again, as if reading a recipe aloud release only upon my written instruction or upon my passing. No exceptions, no family emergencies, no tears as currency. He marked the policy in the file, then turned the envelope so the wax-red sticker faced me. Initial across the seal, he said. I did the pen tip, parting the shine. The envelope lay there, quiet and boundaried the way I want my heart to be. Down at the county recorder's window, the clerk wore readers on a chain. She took the quitclaim and the memorandum of trust stamped, scanned, slid the copies back under the glass. "You're recorded," she said, which sounded like a door catching in its frame. The timestamp ink was still wet when I tucked the papers into my folder. No fanfare, no wisdom music, just the hum of a scanner and the squeak of her chair as she typed the entry that closed the chain of title. Paper, then seal, then public record, locks that aren't spiteful, just locks. Back at the office, we placed a call on speaker. The foundation director answered with a voice that sounded like good shoes on a library floor. We finalized the scholarship that had lived in my yellow pad for months, emergency rent that keeps a roof daycare stipends that keep a job night class tuition that keeps a promise made to oneself in the dark. Name usage would be anonymous while I'm living credited later unless I choose otherwise. I checked the box and pictured some woman in a parking lot at dusk counting change for gas, breathing the way I do 4 in, hold 4 out, and deciding not to give up on herself. A grant can be a hand, but it can also be a mirror that says, "I see you building." "Anything else you want to lock today?" Colson asked, closing a tab on his screen. "Only one small thing," I told him. I texted Tristan Sundays 5-0, 5 minutes, ordinary life. There was a pause long enough to let me hear traffic on 2nd Avenue. Then his reply, "Understood." I archived the thread. An agreement is only real where it can be kept. At home, I opened the fireproof box and laid the fresh copies in labeled folders. The lid made that soft click my bones now know. I set a second silver frame on the counter and slid a new photograph behind the glass. The church roof, sunlit after restoration. No people, just work completed shingles lined like stitches that held. Behind the photo, I tucked one clean page that described the scholarship plain as a grocery list. If someday a caretaker dusts the frame and wonders what it stands for, there will be a page that answers without applause. I packed an overnight bag, the charcoal sweater with elbows polished smooth. The book I've been reading, in small sips a map with the highway traced in pen. I left a note for myself on the counter, no social walk the waterline, and locked the door once, not twice. The house held its own breath as I stepped down. The maple in the front yard shook out a few old leaves late to let go. The sky toward the coast was a deep, rinsed blue. The drive took less time than it used to when Tristan was small and every shoulder became a request to stop. I turned off the radio and let the wind through the cracked window sift the legal office air out of my hair. In the passenger seat, the folder lay like a quiet passenger who paid their share and did not talk too much. Past the dairy farms and the cedar stands, the horizon widened until my chest did too. At Cannon Beach, the wind came clean and honest. I walked the wet line where the sand darkens, shoes in one hand, sweater zipped. A gull landed and regarded me like an usher, then thought better of it and went back to its work. I took out my phone and framed one picture, not of me, not for anyone else, just the long flat of water carrying the day's light in a path, and the tide reaching up to erase the crisscross of footprints like a careful hand turning a page. I saved it and didn't share. Some proofs belong in the drawer of a life you can open without performance. I thought of doors and lines. The church doors held. The bank doors slid. My front door needed a chain for a day and then did not. The lines I drew on paper on thresholds in my voice were not walls. They were the edges of a path. I don't know who will walk it beside me or for how long. That is not a failure. That is weather. Love is not the permitting of harm. Love is the quiet that holds after you refuse it. The sun lowered to that hour where ordinary things glow for free. I sat on a drift log and touched my mother's ring once. Somewhere, a child laughed the particular laugh that comes from running and not falling. I thought about the women whose names I would not know but whose bills would say paid in the small private places where staying afloat begins. I pictured Tristan on some couch with a phone in his hand at 5 o'clock on a Sunday, learning how to tell me what he cooked for dinner, what the weather did where he put his keys. Not penance, practice. I stood and walked the path between the dunes. The sand pressed back, then gave, then forgot me. In the east, a single star showed itself early and unafraid. I took one last breath to the count I had taught myself and felt the weight of the day leave where it could be carried. Respect will meet me where I'm going or it won't. Either way, I keep walking. Here's what I've learned. Dignity isn't the absence of pain, it's choosing a line and keeping it. Boundaries aren't punishment, they're how love grows up. Paperwork can be mercy. A quiet no can protect a lifetime of yeses. Healing is slower than anger, but it lasts longer. If you're facing a door like mine, breathe, write it down, speak calmly, and choose what honors you. What would you have done? Have you held a boundary with family and stayed kind? Tell me where you're watching from. If this story touched you, drop a 1 or share why it didn't. And if you want more honest human stories, please subscribe to the channel.